Welcome back to the Futbol After Show. We are just after witnessing another 2-0 win for Manchester United against Granada. And I'm joined by my two bros, Haider and Joe. We didn't get to have our Red Devils talk this week. So again, it's always good to be able to talk with Manchester United, especially after a game. Joe, how are you getting on today after another 2-0 win after last week's 2-0 win as well?
Yeah. I feel like I'm going through more and more matchsticks watching this team, to be honest, mate, keeping my eyes open. It's tough. I mean, obviously, the Tottenham game was entertaining at the weekend, but the game last Thursday was a bit dull, and we've had a few of them recently, haven't we? But I suppose, you have to accept that when you do a job like you did in Granada last week and win 2-0, it was never going to be too exciting today. And when you look at the team, which I'm sure we'll talk about more in a little while, there's a lot of them players will be playing at the weekend. So, they're never going to sort of play with a high intensity and risk getting injured, because arguably, Sunday, even though it's Burnley at home, is probably just as important, because obviously we need to keep that momentum going in the league. So,
yeah, absolutely. And Haider, I wanted to bring this to you, is that you look at that team that kind of Joe mentions, and one thing that really stuck out to me is the fact that you still had a lot of strong players, and then for Ollie to pick Pogba as the captain was something big, considering, look, there's been a lot of talk around Paul Pogba and possibly leaving Manchester United. And it's not like he was the only senior player that could have been named captain. We saw when he went off, Bruno Fernandes was given the captaincy. What kind of message do you think that sends throughout the dressing room? That do you think it's just that when you deserve to be the captain that you're actually going to be rewarded, which we haven't seen in recent years?
I think it's a political move, if I'm being completely honest with you. I think something you can't fault Solskjaer for on the whole is his man management. He is fantastic at that. It's quite clear the players are happy. It's quite clear that Pogba's happy playing under him. You could argue that Pogba's looking more threatening than he has done at any stage of his Manchester United career. He's definitely, for me, probably right now, the key player. I know Bruno's been fantastic, but Pogba's really stepped up since he came back from that injury November time, didn't he? So, look, I think people read into the captaincy too much, but I think it's a really clever move by Solskjaer, because what he's essentially saying is, look, Paul, you're important to us. We love you. You're a leader. You can be the captain of this great club, and he's giving it to him. And I think it's a smart move. I do just want to say that, look, professional performance tonight, better than the game away at Granada. I thought United just had to get the job done, which they did. Clean sheet, 2 goals, no suspensions, thank God. Ollie did the right thing, taking Pogba off. That was brilliant. Good game management there. Van de Beek had a better game than we've seen for a long time. I was impressed with him today, a bit more progressive. And yeah, just job done. We managed to rotate. Maguire got a rest, and we go. Look, United haven't been that entertaining the past, I'd say 2 to 3 months since the City game. Fantastic against Spurs. Really, really good performance. I really enjoyed that. We all did. While I want to see good performances, I think at this stage in this sort of game against a side who are just, shocking play actors and just all over the gaff, in that respect, they're an absolute nightmare. I thought United did a good job, and job done.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, make sure that you check us out over on YouTube at the HallOfSportz Podcast. And also, Joe, what I wanted to bring up about Pogba there is that I think a lot of the talk in that first half was the yellow card, whether you agree or disagree with it. But then there was a lot, I know the two commentators were saying to kind of take him off as kind of he was close to getting that second yellow. Did you agree with the fact that you wait out to halftime? You can hardly take your captain off with, what was it? I think he got his yellow card within about 20 minutes. It's very hard to take off somebody within the 20 minutes just because they get a yellow card. But I think what Pogba did well after kind of the opportunity to get another is he kind of calmed himself down, didn't get into too many challenges, just made some simple passes and just let the game kind of come to him rather than him trying to force it in that first half.
Yeah, no, I think maybe the captaincy had something to do with the way he approached that first 20 minutes. He was probably keen to try and lead by example. I'm not saying that he ever shirks to tackle, because to be fair to him, he is physical and he does put himself about. But maybe the fact that he was captain maybe made him feel like he had to sort of lead by example, like I say. But I don't know. I mean, it's one of them things in hindsight. It worked to get into half-time and you take him off at half-time. I'm pleased to see he didn't do another Fred, let's put it that way. Obviously, you remember Fred in the Paris Saint-Germain game where people said, get him off at half time because obviously he was a walking second yellow card. Ollie didn't do that. And then ultimately, we paid the price by Fred getting sent off in the second half. But I do think, actually, like you said, it would have been difficult for you to take your captain off after half an hour. But I think if Paul had got another yellow card there in that first half and he had got sent off, I do think the way that social media works, and we know that Ollie's already got his critics when it comes to substitutes, I think some questions would have been asked, and I think it would have made what should be a comfortable night for Ollie and a celebratory night. It's quite awkward in his press conference, but like you said, Paul sort of reined it in well. He knew what he needed to do. He got through to half time. He did get a little knock on his knee as well, didn't he? Just before half time. I'm not saying that made any difference, but look, we know Ollie sort of hesitates making substitutes even later in games, so who knows whether that little knock on the knee was just sort of the final sort of push that he needed. But I'd like to think that he was taking him off anyway at half time. And yeah, credit to both player and manager, it worked. But like I said, if he had got a second yellow card, it's one of those, we might have been talking about something different now.
Yeah, Haider, what was your reaction to when you kind of were witnessing the first half? Because I know there was a lot of Man United fans that were getting very antsy, saying that Paul needs to come off, just put Donny on now. Do you think it's a little bit unrealistic for a manager to take someone off within the first kind of 25, 30 minutes? Because we know the majority of the time, the first time someone gets taken off, especially under Ollie, is usually at halftime. We don't tend to see substitutions in the first half. But once that did happen, do you think that it was the right decision that he took him off at halftime, and especially for the player that he brought on to get Donny that 45 minutes that are really important, because he hasn't played recently, and the fact that he didn't get to start this game was kind of surprising to me anyway, because especially after that first goal, the game was pretty much dead from there on.
I recalled reactionary before the game for saying that if Donny can't play a game like this, what game can he play? I think that's fair. It's a fair question to ask, because look, let's be completely honest with you. There was, for me, out of every team we played this year in the Europa League, there was no way I thought we were going to concede against this side. They had nothing going forward. I know in the second half they're a bit better, but that first leg, they didn't really come to play. They came to rough United up. So I was surprised, I'll be honest with you, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity to rest Bruno. I understand the reasoning behind why Bruno played, but Ollie is pragmatism first, in the sense of he wants to see out the result before he makes those changes. I'll be honest, I sat there and I thought, if Pogba gets sent off, social media is going to go absolutely crazy. They'll talk about Fred, and that crossed my mind. If it was any other player but Paul Pogba, or let's say Bruno Fernandes, I think Ollie would have taken them off. I genuinely think so. If that was Fred, he would have taken them off. He wouldn't have waited twice. I think it was quite, like I said, it's a political move. You take Paul Pogba off after making him captain after 20 to 25 minutes, even if you are thinking you're doing the right thing. You have Raiola talking, you have all of this that comes after it. You got to think about that. So I think Ollie was smart on that. I give him kudos. I tweeted at halftime saying, Van der Beek for Pogba, really good game management. It's nice to see Ollie learning from what he saw last time. And I think it was the right decision. Look, at the end of the day, like I said, it was a really professional performance. I enjoyed quite a bit of it, if I'm honest with you, and I haven't enjoyed a lot of United's games recently. But I just thought that United always looked in control. Cavani was fantastic. We managed to see Ahmad as well for a little bit at the end. So, yeah, he did the right thing. And look, it's all about trying to get Paul Pogba to sign that new contract. Whether he stays till the end of that contract or not does not matter. It's about securing him down and not having to worry about bringing in someone else in midfield when we've already got 4, 5, 6 areas of the side that we still need to address.
Yeah, it's a big point, actually, Joe, because you look at Pogba, especially recently, and he's actually been that kind of central cog of the team that's really pushed us forward, because we're starting to see Bruno be in a little bit of poor form, where it's not like he's playing really badly. He's just not influencing the game as much as you see Pogba influencing the game. And like we said, maybe in the short term is going to be a really difficult task to actually replacing a player of his ilk. And do you think that Ollie trying to, and again, it goes to his man management skills, that he's trying to kind of cradle Paul Pogba, that it tries to keep him at the club for, even if it is that little bit longer, where he can sign that deal and maybe 2 years into the deal, he still wants to go, and United agreed to sell him, similarly to how we did it with Cristiano Ronaldo. Yeah. I think, have you been impressed with the way kind of Ollie has dealt with this situation? Because we heard about Pogba potentially leaving at the start of the season, and it could have been very tricky. And he's actually gone through the season quite seamlessly.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was striking today that he made Pogba captain, because you look at the team that was out there. You've got Bruno Fernandes. I mean, I don't know whether there's official vice captains here. I don't really know how it works, but we all talk about Bruno. People say he should be the captain of the team anyway. And we know what kind of leader he is. You know, his experience of being a captain at Sporting. So you had him on the pitch who could have been captain. You've had De Gea on the pitch there, who's also took the captain's armband at times when Harry's not played and other captains have not been available. De Gea's been captain. So it was quite striking that he did give it Paul today. And I think I absolutely echo everything Haider said. I do think, and like you said, I think it is a political move. But it's maybe a good move, because that could be the difference between someone like Paul Pogba staying. I mean, they'll not be able to guarantee him the captaincy. Well, they might be able to, but that would be a tricky sell to maybe someone like Harry Maguire. But, you know, if he is seen like valued, like when you give the captaincy armband to somebody, then that could be just the nudge that he needs. And, you know, you talk about there about, you know, getting another couple of years out of him or you know, what can we do with him? You know, I think I said on a show the other week, and I've said to you guys before, I'm actually in a situation now where, as crazy as it might sound, I like the idea of him going on a free more than I do actually trying to sell him in the summer, because I think if we can get past this summer and we still got Paul Pogba, two things happen. One, it gives us another year and it gives us another transfer window to sort of bring in some more players and improve the squad sort of with Paul and behind Paul. And sort of two, it also just allows Ollie that sort of more thinking time in order to get somebody in who's going to be able to replace Paul. I think if he goes, I mean, you look at the players that were linked with this in this window, none of them really look like Paul Pogba replacements, do they? We're talking about addressing people like Declan Rice coming in. He's a position that we need anyway. He's not a player that potentially replaces Paul Pogba. And I think United will need time to work on those deals. But also with that season that we keep Paul for next season, you've got more time to try and get him on a new contract and try and get in his ear. It's very rare that big players like that, when they do get into the last year of their contract, do decide to sign. But actually, as the year goes on, if it becomes another difficult year for clubs and more clubs make it clear to Raiola and Pogba that they may not be able to offer him the contract that he wants, even when he's free following year, he might realise that Manchester United is the best club for him. And if United have another good window in terms of recruitment and the team goes on another level and improves, he might think that this is best for his career, and he might see that this club can be successful in the future. So I think there's more going for the fact that you risk going into the last year of his contract and just see what happens, and what will be. Even if he goes on a free the following season, you're still getting his wage bill, obviously, off. You know, it's not like you're getting nothing for him at all. Obviously, his wage bill will go off of the club's wage bill. So I think, I'm in the situation now where I think we have to be smart with this. Unless we get a really good bid for him this summer, I'd rather keep him another year.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, where I want to go to is kind of the start of the game, because we saw a really good goal kind of built up with Alex Telles, Paul Pogba as well, and a great finish by Edinson Cavani. Now, we were going to be talking about some of the traits that Cavani has midweek, Haider, and one of the things that we notice is just the movement that he possesses, and it just seems like he always knows where to be in the box. And I think the funny thing was the commentators during the game were saying it's probably the most amount of space he's had for a goal in the last 10 years. But you have to give it up, even though there wasn't that kind of silky Manchester United performance. That first goal warranted a lot of praise, both from the setup from the goal and also the finish from Cavani.
Absolutely. Now, that's two performances we've seen Cavani, put in a really good performance. And I said something on Twitter today, and I said it on the masterclass the other day. Give Cavani service, he will score goals. He's a sort of striker. I compared him to Martial. Now, doesn't mean one is bad. Doesn't mean Martial's a bad player. He's just a completely different sort of striker. With Cavani, he's going to stay up high, which means that he's not going to get as involved in the build-up. If he's not going to get as involved in the build-up, that means you've got to get the ball to him. What Martial will do is he will drop deep. And That helped United, obviously, after the project restart, because we were just playing really, really well. We were, Rashford was making those out to in runs, so was Mason. They were able to run into space behind because Martial was dropping deep. With Cavani, he's not going to do that. And that's why, if you're going to have a striker like him in the side, and that's why I compared him to Haaland today, and I compared Kane a little bit more to Martial, because Kane will drop deep, although he can stay up high. When you're having a look at Cavani, Mason played that ball in, obviously, the other day. We saw Tellez, who's a really good crosser as well. So these are sort of players you need around a player like Cavani, or players that are going to create if you want to play a striker like that. I think that's what Ollie wants to go for. We've talked about Haaland, haven't we, before? We've talked about at Mulder how, he liked to strike to play on the last man, and it's something Martial doesn't do. I think the thing about Cavani is it's just his age, isn't it? You can look, his instinctual sort of movement in the box is unbelievable. The one near the end where he sort of made that run inside and it came off his shoulder. I mean, look, I'm not going to say you can't teach that, because you can teach that, but it is instinctual still. Like he automatically knows how to create that little half yard of space, that little half a second for him to get an opportunity off. And it's something I don't see from someone like Martial. I'm talking about, sort of inside the box, going towards the 6-yard box. Something that Martial doesn't have naturally. Doesn't mean he's not a striker. He's just a different type of striker. So, yeah, look, it was a fantastic goal. And I look at Cavani and I think if United want to play with a striker like that, they need some creation on that right-hand side, which is why I've been saying we need someone like Jadon Sancho. If they play with someone like Martial, who's going to drop deep, then you can probably get away with not signing a right winger or someone like that. So it's just interesting because United have got two strikers and they're two completely different strikers. And people see that as a positive because you can either play one sort of way. If you want the striker more involved in the build-up, then you have Martial. If you want him to basically, stay on that last man, create that space, sort of just be a fox in the box, you have Cavani. But I actually think it's actually gone against United because depending on who the number 9 is, and we see that with a lot of players in the side, there's so many different types of players for the same position. You've got Bruno and then you've got Van der Beek. The problem is that when you make those rotations, the style of the team completely changes. And I think that's what you're seeing with United. I think, Martial being out injured has actually kind of helped United a little bit because it means that Cavani will play more regularly. It'll be a bit more of a settled style. And then you're starting to see the players understanding what they need to do with Cavani, give him service. So look, it was another good performance by him. He's absolutely class. You always say this, but look, if he was 3 to 5 years younger, United would be laughing here. So yeah, look, I would like him to stay if that means that we go and get someone like Sancho, but I'm not too convinced that he's going to stay. I think his future is in Boca Juniors, and I think he wants to go home.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Joe, especially one of the points that Haider makes is about kind of the different strikers, because we actually brought this up last week when we were talking about kind of the attacking platform and the attacking plan. And we were kind of talking about it more for the midfielders and kind of the wing backs as well, because it's very difficult for some of those midfielders to know what exactly the striker wants when we're constantly using different styles of strikers. So like we're saying that you have Cavani, if the backup to Cavani, or if Cavani was the backup and they both played very similar styles, then it would be easier for, I think, the attacking lineup to actually work seamlessly when you have to change it. But the problem is when that doesn't happen and we have to keep changing from Martial to Greenwood to Cavani, we start seeing those differences and it doesn't really flow as well. So how important do you think it has been that Cavani has come in? Because for me, this is this type of striker I feel that United have actually been crying out for the past 4 or 5 seasons.
Yeah, I think if you look at the way Ollie wants to play the 4-2-3-1 and what he wants from his number 9, you need someone like a Cavani. And I think that's why, there's no secret that they've been looking at the likes of Haaland and Harry Kane, similar players who want to do sort of similar role, but obviously these players are not cheap and they're not, and it's not easy to get them, and then a player's only as good as the players around him. And I've watched Haider a lot on the football masterclass about talking about Sancho, and I think he's exactly right. I think you've only got to look at Haaland's performances in the last couple of games for Dortmund in the 2 legs against Man City, and for as good as he is, without Jadon Sancho in that team and a couple of other players, he didn't get service. And if he doesn't get service, like any number 9 of that type, they just don't look the same player. And I think, yes, I think you're right, Ciaran. It is right, and it is what United want, this kind of number 9, but they're not easy to get. And again, similarly with Pogba, I think it would benefit United so much if they could just keep Cavani for another season, because it allows them then to look at strengthening other areas of the team that need it more. If Cavani goes this summer, United have to buy a number 9. Now, how good that number 9 is, does that number 9 have to be a backup to Mason, or is it another number 9 that's going to come in and strengthen this team straight away and take us forward? And then, like you said, what sort of number 9 are they going to sign? Are they then going to try and change their style and system so that they play with their number 9 playing the way that maybe Mason plays the game, and they want someone similar to Mason? Or do they want, like we've said, that sort of number 9 similar to Gardy? So again, I think it might seem, no big deal whether Cavani goes or not this summer, but I think it causes United a problem, because I think even though Cavani's not going to start every game, we know that because with what we've seen this season, another year older, they have got to replace that player, because we are really sure. Because look, we don't know what Anthony Martial we're going to get this summer. I mean, if we were guaranteed to get the Martial number 9 that we got last season, then it's maybe not such a big problem. But you can't guarantee that with Martial, because we know what he's like. He's so up and down. So, yeah, Cavani, as much as a lot of people might think, well, we only expected him here a year, it's no big deal. I think it's really important for United just to try and do everything they can to keep him, just because then they don't have to worry about, again, addressing that in this summer. Because for me, positions like right wing, centre-back, CDM are where United need to really have their energy this summer, so they don't need the inconvenience of trying to find another striker, I don't think.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because the one thing I think of when I watch Cavani, Haider, is he's one of those strikers it's guaranteed goals every single season. And it's one thing that we, like Joe's mentioned, we don't get that with Anthony Martial, that he has his moments where he's really, really good, and then he has moments where he doesn't look like he's really convinced to actually play in the game. And we always say that you can tell what type of Martial that you're going to get within the first 10 minutes. And that's really bad for a striker, because all strikers should want to score and be in that kind of fox in the box every single game. Like you mentioned, the Harry Kane likes to be involved in the build-up play. We've seen how he's played really well with Son, but you will see him in games try and get that kind of dirty goal that we just don't see from Martial. We've seen it from Edison Cavani this year, and we keep mentioning that if he was a few years younger, the fact that he's doing it now, he's doing it in the Premier League, he's done it when we were playing in both the Champions League and Europa League now. It's, even if Cavani does go, it doesn't have to be that big household name striker that comes in, but it needs to be someone that's actually going to do the job that Cavani did, because it's the one thing that I completely agreed. When everybody was kind of overhyping the likes of bringing in Haaland before I think the 140 or 160 million was being garnished out there, that I've always been kind of in the camp that you need to get that right side of the attack fixed, because we're too unbalanced, and the fact that you need someone like Jadon Sancho, and it just shows, I think, having Cavani this season, just how important that kind of, we need to kind of go back to where we used to be with our strikers, that we kind of went for those kind of Ruud van Nistelrooy style strikers that you want to get in behind, you want to get those goals from inside the box. And you can tell that Ollie wants that, because he's been talking about that ever since he's joined the club.
Yeah, I think when you first came in, you thought he wants a fluid front three, and I think he does to an extent, but actually as time has gone on this season, I think he wants more of a focal point. Haaland's not going to, he might come out to the right, you see that, and he obviously plays, he comes back in on his left, and he just, finishes it in the bottom corner. So Haaland has the ability to do that. Look, Haaland is a fantastic talent. What I don't necessarily buy is that, obviously United, this might be a bit controversial. United did the right thing waiting on Jadon Sancho and waiting a year. I know it's frustrating. I know we'd love to have had Jadon Sancho, but the money was just crazy at that time. They've done the right thing. They need to now go and pick him up, because for me, when I look at it, it's what I tweeted today. No point having a Ferrari if you haven't got an engine. And at the end of the day, United have always had number 9s that score 20 plus goals a season. And we haven't had that since Robin van Persie, I don't think. I don't know if Zlatan hit. Lukaku hit it for one season. He hit over 20 goals. I know Martial did last season. But that's what 2 seasons we're thinking now in the past 7 to 8 years. It's a problem. But another thing to add to that as well is that those sides that Fergie had were balanced. You had a right winger. United don't have a right winger. Now, I see a lot of people saying, why don't we go for Rafinha, and then we go and get Haaland? Rafinha is going to cost 60 million. People are saying Pedro Neto. I really like Pedro Neto. 60 million. Why go and spend that much money? We can just go and get Sancho for 20 million more. So it's just about thinking. It's just about thinking and building the team properly. What was the question? I've just gone off on a tangent here.
Oh, just the fact that about that kind of style of striker that it's something that I feel like we have missed, and it's something that Ollie has always wanted, because from the start, when we heard in that first season what he wanted to see from Marcus Rashford and what he wanted to see from Anthony Martial was to score the dirty goals, to get in, and the ones that, like, to get your head in there or to get that kind of dirty touch that just goes in, that we actually do see from a lot of the kind of great United strikers, even some of the average ones. Like we saw the likes of Louis Saha used to do that in the couple seasons that he was productive for Manchester United. Under Ferguson, there was always one striker that was willing to put their body on the line to score a goal. And before Cavani came in, I don't think we had that. And that was, I think, the biggest problem in our front line.
Yeah, spot on. I'm just trying to think about it now, sort of over the years with Fergie. He always had a player that would do that. Sometimes he'd have a couple. I think strikers have changed as well. They all want to go and score the beautiful goal. That's what I've seen. If you look at Martial, look, he's not a bad player. And this is the thing. I see a lot of hate for him. He's had a really bad season. There's no doubting it. But no one was saying anything against him the end of last season. We've shown you can do it. The issue is really just the consistency. I do think when Martial plays, playing devil's advocate, but when Cavani plays, I think Bruno is less effective. And the reason why I say that is because, one, like I said earlier, Cavani is going to stay up highest, which means that, Bruno, the gap between him and Bruno is bigger. While Cavani does bring players into the game, it is difficult for Bruno. He does pick up the ball quite deep if he's playing with McFred, for example. That's why Pogba is so key for Bruno. If McFred have 2 outlets, whether they go to Bruno or they go to Pogba, and then obviously Pogba and Bruno are closer together, Pogba plays more infield. But I feel like when Cavani plays, Bruno likes to get beyond the striker, doesn't he? He likes to make those runs into the box. He likes to get, likes to be the furthest man forward. He can do that with Martial, because Martial will drop, turn, dribble, look to play it to Bruno. But if you notice when he plays with Cavani, he doesn't get beyond the last man, because the last man's in, obviously on the last man. So I think that's something to take into consideration. If United play with a striker like Haaland, I know obviously they'll feed him and he'll score goals, but United have to think as well. Does that mean Bruno Fernandes scores and assists less? We've seen already he's slowed down massively in the last 2 to 3 months. If he's carrying on this sort of form, United should be concerned, because he's got a large chunk of United's goals and assists. So that's something to think about. Sort of systemically, whether it is the right decision when you're bringing in the number 9, or how it's going to affect someone like Bruno, who's been so prolific and has won so many games for Manchester United. But look, the final point on this will be, United need a right winger, because it doesn't matter who's playing up front. If your right wing is changing every single week, which it does, or if it's, for example, not creating enough, it's not providing enough balance is one of the biggest things, Ciaran. You mentioned that United are unbalanced. When you've got balance, you get unpredictability in your attack. When United are unbalanced, you know that they're going to go down the left more times than not. You know that when Wan-Bissaka makes that run up the wing, Bruno sometimes doesn't pass to him, because he's like, it's Wan-Bissaka. In the nicest way possible. So with balance comes unpredictability, which means you can, overload the wide areas, which means that Bruno will have more space centrally to make those runs. It's just so logical. So with more balance is more space for people like Martial, Mason playing centrally. They're going to score goals. There's no way that Mason and Martial have as bad a season they had this season. And it also means you can rest Rashford if you play Sancho on the left. Ahmad will be a year older as well. He can also rotate. It makes logical sense for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, one point I do want to bring in, because the one thing I do notice, and we saw it again tonight when you have the likes of Fred and Matic at the holding midfield role, Joe, Haider mentioned this in a kind of a different context in terms of if you have a Ferrari, you actually need the engine first. And the one thing that I always think of when I do think of the engine in terms of a football pitch is that midfield. And unfortunately, when you have two midfielders, and you do see it with McTominay as well, with Matic and Fred, the ball's going side to side the whole time. And that's why we saw Luke Shaw play so well this season. He's getting more of the ball because that's actually where the ball is going. And it's the reason why you see him and Wan-Bissaka be on the ball so much, because we actually don't have many midfielders that actually like to actually take risks on the ball. Yeah. Like, I think the last midfielder that probably did it for us was probably Michael Carrick, that you have Pogba to a certain extent, but he likes to kind of run through with the ball, which is fine. But I guess my biggest question is, in terms of, we are talking about this attacking line, and we're talking about Bruno and the fact that he has to come deeper to collect the ball. Do you think that the biggest kind of need for this Manchester United team actually is within that central midfield position? Because look, we see teams like Leicester all the time with Ndidi, and we see other teams in the Champions League. You just have to look at it the last two nights. That centre mid position is so important to be able to release those strikers and to give them the freedom to be able to express themselves. And that's what Ollie has wanted. He does want a style of a free-flowing attacking line. But the problem is United, and I go back to this whole point, we're so unbalanced at all three areas of the team that it actually affects what Ollie wants to do overall. It doesn't mean we're a bad team, because look, we're seeing that we're able to do enough to win games. But to be able to put into performances, I think, that the manager wants, there's so many areas that need to be fixed. And I think one of the key ones is that kind of holding midfielder, or kind of central midfielder, the kind of old style of central midfielder that we see in kind of Fred, Matic and McTominay.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why I touched on it earlier when I was talking about not having to sign a striker this summer, because, United that's the kind of player that United need to be signing. And again, Ciaran, those kind of players cost money and are going to cost big money. So you can't be blowing all your transfer budget on a striker when, I think that I'm exactly the same as you and Haider. I think that position is far more important for United. And look, it's not even about Fred and Matic tonight passing it side to side. It's about Fred and Matic even completing passes. The passing was shocking tonight from, even when they try and pass side to side, they're not pulling off a lot of the passes. I mean, it's even when the ball's coming into them and they're receiving it. I mean, Fred today, nothing seemed to be sticking. I mean, absolute sort of polar opposite to his performance I felt against Tottenham, where I thought, especially second half, he was brilliant for us. But tonight, I think maybe his performance sort of mirrored the team, and he's probably thinking himself, I might be playing again on Sunday, so I'm trying to preserve it. You don't quite play at 90%, and then your concentration goes. It was all a bit lax. But yeah, I mean, moving forward, United, and it's not even about feeding Bruno, I don't think, from that position. It's about even a player being able to pick out the strikers from there. You know what I mean? It's not about just getting that ball to Bruno. It's about someone having the imagination to sort of play it long and pick out. But, we've seen Lindelof do it a few times with that ball he plays to Rashford. Obviously saw it in the first leg against Granada. And I think we saw it earlier in the season against Sheffield United, didn't we, at Bramall Lane? But you want that midfielder to be playing that pass. That's the sort of Carrick pass, that you touched on. Michael Carrick's a great example, and I think you're right. I think he's probably, in terms of a holding midfielder, the last great passer we had who played that position. So just surprised me a little bit, I've got to say, with Michael Carrick on the coaching staff, that maybe that's an area of the game that's not quite, that hasn't maybe improved as much as I thought it would. I'm not saying that he can turn people into Michael Carrick, but you'd hope that even intent, because the problem that I have with them as well is that not only do they not make them passes and maybe are not capable of those passes, are they even looking for those passes? I mean, I watch Fred and McTominay, and for me, they don't get their head up enough. I know we probably don't move as well as we could as a front three at times. Our movement can be quite static, especially when we play against lower block teams. But there is times when people do make runs, and I don't think Fred even looks for it, if you know what I mean. So first of all, we need to recruit someone that wants to look for those passes, and then ultimately, obviously, someone who can also sort of play them. The problem is, I mean, we touched on Pogba there. Pogba's not even sort of an option for that position at the moment, because it seems like Ollie wants to play him high up on the left. So, I mean, we know Pogba's got the ability to play that role. Actually, I prefer to sort of see him there, to be honest. Although I think if Pogba can play higher up on the left, but throughout the game can come centrally now and again and swap with Bruno, that could be a fit. I thought they did that really well against Tottenham. You can criticise us sometimes for maybe being too fluid, players changing position too much, but I don't know what they did against Tottenham, but the way that Pogba came centrally at times and Bruno went wider and everything like that, it just seemed to dovetail really nicely. But you know, I think that's where they've got to get to, because I don't think, for me, Pogba should be an option there, but I think Ollie wants to see him further up the pitch because that's where he wants to see him influence games, and you can't really argue with that, because if you look at his productivity and his creativity in the last couple of games from those higher positions, he's been really good. Against Tottenham, he was fantastic. He obviously got, he should have had 2 assists, shouldn't he? You know, he should have had the assist for the first goal that ever was. And obviously he got the assist for Greenwood's late goal. And again tonight, I mean, that header that he placed tonight, he knows what he's doing there. He's not just trying to flick that on to nobody. He knows exactly where Cavani is, and he cushions it just perfectly. Yeah,
it's a very interesting point there, especially the ones that you mentioned with Fred and McTominay, and you talk about kind of Michael Carrick. The one thing that always comes to my head when I kind of hear people talking about, well, what's Michael Carrick doing with these players, and I always come back to the proverb is that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink it, and that's the whole.
I understand.
That's
what I'm saying is, I would like to see them, at least Michael, telling them to look for these. I don't feel like they're looking for them. Whether they can execute them is something else, Ciaran. I'm not sure.
I think that's what it is, probably, Joe. It's probably, yeah. I'm not under no impression Carrick saying look forward. I just don't think either of them have it in their locker.
That's the problem. And look, as a midfielder, and you guys would know, because when you do play, it's something innate in you that you either do it or you don't. We've all played on football teams where there's a player that constantly, once he gets the ball, he looks for it. And then there's others that just prefer to play the safe passes and not make mistakes. And unfortunately, the majority of the United midfielders are kind of risk averse, that they just don't want to make the mistake to where they're going to concede. And when you look at some of the better Manchester United teams over time, it was the complete opposite, that they didn't care if they conceded. Okay, we'll score 2. And the problem is the fact that we don't have those midfielders that do want to risk to try and bring that ball forward. I think that's one of the key things that we are actually missing. But look, at the end of the day, I think you mentioned it at the very start, Haider, and it's a really important one, is that it was a professional performance. We mentioned it last week, Joe, that all they needed to do was get through this. We said it last week, and they kind of going through the game, even though Granada were trying to attack in the second half, I never really felt worried that we were going to concede, which is weird for this United team, because every single game when we're talking in the group chat, we're like, last couple of minutes here, what's going to happen? But look, I want to kind of move it on to one of the next points, and it's one of kind of the last topics that I really wanted to talk about, and it is to do with kind of the goalkeeping position, Haider, because we saw De Gea actually made some really good saves at the end that he made it look very routine, but they're actually really, really impressive saves. There's a couple of chances just inside the box. There was one shot from outside the box that I don't know how he just caught it straight away, and I'm surprised he didn't parry it. But you're seeing now where De Gea's now playing in the Europa League games while we have Henderson in the Premier League. And look, he played excellent against Tottenham as well. So how well do you think Solskjaer and Manchester United as a whole this year, considering what they had to do in terms of having 2 goalkeepers that want to play, do you think that they've managed it as best they can, or do you think they should have made a decision earlier on who was going to be the goalkeeper for Manchester United?
I honestly think if De Gea hadn't gone back for the birth of his daughter, I think he'd still be number 1. I really think Ollie...
Yeah, that's fair.
I think Ollie's managed it well, but I think people are giving him so much credit for something he had to do. Like, if your keeper's going back to Spain and it's the middle of a pandemic, he ain't going to be back for a month. And then you gave Henderson the opportunity, and Henderson hasn't put a foot wrong. You could maybe argue in the Everton game, he probably should have made that save at the end for the final Calvert-Lewin goal. But look, I said after the Spurs game, one of the biggest positives was how quickly Henderson was off his line. It shocked me. He was like a sweeper keeper. Absolutely shocked me. Very Manuel Neuer-esque in terms of just smashing it up there. That allows United to play a higher line. You saw that. Lindelof and Maguire are obviously slow, but they seem a lot more comfortable knowing behind them the keeper's going to come out. I think Henderson did it about 6 times. And there was at one point, I think, was it in the second or the first half, De Gea had the opportunity to come out and he went and kicked it. He should have dived on it and collected it in the box. He went and kicked it and it went low, and luckily United managed to clear it. And right there, I was like, that's why Henderson's the number one. That is purely the reason. Because De Gea made some great saves today. De Gea's looking good, but he doesn't come off his line quick enough. He's not as commanding. Commanding in the sense of, look, Henderson's dropped a few in the box trying to collect it, but having slow centre backs that know behind you that your goalkeeper is going to be brave and come out. Like, Henderson strikes me as someone who's self-assured, he's confident.
Yeah.
De Gea, and I love David De Gea, but David De Gea, look, I don't know him. I'm just saying from what I see, he seems a bit more quiet. He's a bit more, he's a bit more reserved. Not that he doesn't shout. You hear him all the time. He does shout. He does communicate. But with Henderson, you can tell there's a bit of arrogance there. And for me, that's purely the reason why he's playing, and he is the future. So I think while Ollie, people are praising Ollie, oh look, he managed to, he's managed to handle this so well. It was forced upon him, but he made the best out of it. And I'm impressed with Henderson. And you guys knew I had doubts over him. It's something that Rob actually said on the masterclass, which I do agree with, and I do want to relate. And he said that, look, Henderson probably will never be like one of the best goalkeepers in the world. It's probably, I don't think he's got the ability either. David De Gea's, highest level. Henderson will never touch that. But Henderson will still be a really good Premier League keeper. He'll be a really good, keeper in Europe. And United don't need to have an absolutely world-class keeper. If United can limit the amount of shots that people have against them, you don't need a keeper that makes 30 saves a game. You just need one that stays, stays. Look, as Green Devil says here, when you look at Edison, sweeper keeper. So what Henderson probably, has over De Gea is the fact that he's brave off his line. And that's why he'll start. And that's why he is, he's Man United's new number one. And sort of just adding to it, if De Gea goes, I think United got to pay Paul Pogba what he wants. If De Gea goes, that's nearly 500 grand off the wage bill. Just pay Pogba what he wants. I don't want to lose him. I understand what Joe's saying. Sort of just at least, losing him for free won't be that bad. We don't know what's going on with fans. We don't know what's going on with the pandemic. United need to have as much money as possible. Give Pogba 400 grand a week. Give Bruno a pay rise. Keep these players, because there's no point going and getting Jadon Sancho and then losing Paul Pogba. It's not a good look for the club at all. It's sometimes you've got to keep up appearances, and United need to show they can keep their stars.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, especially when we do talk about that goalkeeper position there, Joe. The one thing I've actually been impressed in recent weeks is you're actually seeing some improvements in Henderson's shot stopping, because we always wondered that how would he cope with being in a team where he doesn't have to do too much, but then towards the end of the game, he needs to kind of show up and make the saves. And I think he is starting to evolve as a goalkeeper for Manchester United. And one of the points that you made, Haider, I don't know if it was the same instance that kind of came out to my mind, but I think it was in the second half that De Gea comes out and he kind of clears the ball, and it just looked very awkward the way he was doing it. It was more of like it was forced that he had to come out, but he didn't really want to. And it's something that you do notice, that the fact is De Gea maybe relies a little bit too much on the shot stopping, that he feels he doesn't need to come out all the time, because, look, if somebody goes 1-on-1, I back myself to save it. But look, I think what we did see Henderson do is the fact that while, like Haider said, he has dropped a couple of balls, it is the way it works with the goalkeepers, is that you have to be confident now. You have to be able to come out. You need to be able to be that style of sweeper keeper. And if you can do that, it does help the defense, especially when we look at the defenders that we do have right now. And in terms of, because look, we've spoken with Henderson a couple of times. You saw him kind of early on in his career, and kind of been looking at his kind of development over time. How impressed have you been with kind of his, even just the development from the start of the season, where we saw him the couple of times in the cup, to now you look at how he played against Tottenham, and he's probably one of the better players in the pitch for United.
Yeah, look, I think, you know, I've still got question marks over Dean, and I'm sure a lot of people have, and we'll see. But yeah, I think, to be fair, you know, any other position on the pitch, and we talk about game time and having that match rhythm, don't we? And I think people forget that that's important for goalkeepers as well, you know. And I think it's tricky at times because you can go a while without playing, and it does worry me now because it seems like De Gea is going to be the Europa League goalkeeper, and Dave for the last 10 years has played for United non-stop, and you do wonder whether we might not see De Gea again now until we play Roma in the semi-final. I think it's Roma we've got, and that's going to be like towards the end of April, isn't it? It's a couple of weeks from now, sort of thing. So, you know, will it help Dave by having that gap and not getting that match rhythm when he's been used to playing so much? So it's tricky, but, you know, Henderson, yeah, I have been impressed, but actually his slow progress and the way he's moved throughout this season has actually mirrored his career. And I've talked about this before, and I've told you guys, you know, the nature of his loan spells, starting out in League Two, and then his next loan spell was League One, and his next loan spell was Championship, and that Championship team he was in got promoted to the Premier League, and then he had a fantastic first season. So he's gone up and up and up, and he's sort of worked it really well, and he's progressed really nicely. And I think since he's come to United, he probably started off a bit shaky. He didn't look great in his first couple games. You probably didn't think there was a lot of difference between him and De Gea. But I think as the season's gone on, he's kicked on again, just like I say, which mirrors his career. And I think as good as De Gea was tonight, and he did make some great saves, I think you see why Dean Henderson is the number one at the moment, because apart from the instance that Haider talks about there, which I remember clearly as well, it was really strange. In fact, I was wondering whether it was a back pass, to be honest, and that was that why he kicked it. But also there was a couple of other instances where they put quite deep balls into the box, you know, crosses. And I was thinking to myself, I just think Henderson would have called it. I don't know, because obviously we'll never know. But they looked like they had a lot of airtime on them. And he does seem to be very good at coming. And the fact that he spilt a couple doesn't worry me too much, because actually you can improve your handling. You get a good goalkeeping coach there. They will improve his catching and his handling on that. What I'm more impressed with Henderson is that, like we were talking about with the midfielders, he's got the intent there to at least do it. You know, he wants to do it. That's his first thought. I think De Gea's first thought is to stay back and I'll save the shot. Whereas I think Henderson's first thought is I'm going to come and take responsibility. And that's what I want from my goalkeeper. And you touched on it there, Ciaran, and I've said it for many years, and I think everybody's said it. If you're going to be a top-class goalkeeper at United, one of the biggest qualities that you have to have is concentration. Because if this team's going to improve, you're going to have games where you have 80, 85 minutes where you have nothing to do, and teams will create opportunities late on. We've seen it all the time. And I think that's why everybody used to think, oh, why is it a big deal being a goalkeeper at United? Because you need a different skill set. You need different traits to what you need at other clubs. And I think we've seen when goalkeepers who have been at other clubs and had lots of shots at them, they've looked really good. And then when they've gone to bigger clubs and they don't have much to do, they've looked weaker. And that was my big concern with Henderson, because he looked fantastic at Sheffield United, but he was getting a lot more action than he will get at United. But he's shown that he's got that side to his game as well. And I think it was clear, wasn't it? The writing was on the wall, Ciaran, at the start of the season when they gave him a 6-year contract. 6-year contract. It was just about when United pulled the trigger.
Yeah,
and
like that was.
Said it was perfect. De Gea having a baby. A lot of people might look at that and may think that's a reason to criticise Ollie. Not a very nice thing to do. You've allowed him to go and see the birth of his baby, and he's lost his shirt, but. This is football, and it's ruthless. And I think De Gea would have known it was coming anyway. I think we don't even see what goes on day-to-day in training. I would imagine Dean Henderson, from what the Dean Henderson I've heard of, would have been an absolute pain in the bum while ever he was number 2. He won't have been enjoying that. He'll have been in Ollie's ear. He'll have been in the other players' ear, and he'll have been saying, I'm going to get this number 1 shirt. And if I have to talk my way into it and scream my way into it, I'm going to get it. And again, that's another quality that you want to see from a Man United player.
Yeah, it kind of goes to what Mike has said here, is that you want your goalkeeper to be vocal. And the one thing that some of the stories that have come out, because they have come out to say that he has been vocal and he is really confident in his ability. And it's the one thing that I do think that makes a Manchester United goalkeeper a Man United goalkeeper is not only do they have to have good shot stopping, they need to have a certain amount of quality. It's that mentality that we saw in the likes of Edwin van der Sar that may have not been in terms of when he came to Manchester United, because it was later in his career. He wouldn't have been as athletic as he was when he was younger. But the thing was, mentally, he knew exactly what he had to do. He knew when he had to come out, when he had to stay in. Look, he kind of got the benefit as well of being behind the likes of Nemanja Vidic and Rio Ferdinand. But when you look at some of the best United goalkeepers out there, you do look at their mentality. Like the one that I always look at in terms of the mentality wasn't there was Fabian Barthez. That he had the athletic ability, but it wasn't all there in terms of he didn't know when he was supposed to do one thing versus the other. At times, I see that in David De Gea when there are balls being put into the box. It's like he's not too sure if he's supposed to come out or stay in. And I guess this kind of the last kind of question that I have on this header before we kind of wrap up the show. But we've seen Man United now lose, 4 or 5 semi-finals. We saw the way De Gea performed in a cup towards the end of last season, one of the semi-finals against Chelsea, the FA Cup, which again we can say was pretty much we threw that game away anyway. But when you look at the players and you hear the likes of Bruno Fernandes come out, Harry Maguire come out saying that they want to win this competition, and there's been stories that there's been players that have wanted Dean Henderson to be able to get that chance to play. Do you think that if they do play David De Gea, that's going to affect anything at all? Because if you're choosing that Dean Henderson is your number one choice goalkeeper from now and going forward, and you're saying that the Europa League is really important, that we really want to win, that by picking then David De Gea, does that go against kind of what you're portraying out there, that this is a really important competition? Because look, we're playing against Roma that have good attacking threats that do, and you have to look at, they have the likes of Edin Dzeko that they will pump in a lot of crosses into the box, and you're going to need a goalkeeper that will command his area against Roma, because not only are they good attacking wise, but they're going to be hard to break down as well.
Can't forget Mike Smalling as well. He's obviously a threat at set pieces. I'll be honest with you. I don't think Ollie has any qualms about changing his goalkeeper in the semi-final. We saw that with Romero, and Romero obviously was extremely unhappy. Now he's been frozen out. And I'll be honest with you, I think United have treated Romero absolutely disgustingly. There's people that turn around and say, oh, well, it's a big club, it's what you do. That was really wrong what they did. Romero should have been given the opportunity to be the goalkeeper all the way through that competition. Now, it's a bit easier for Ollie because he can turn around and say, oh, well, Henderson started off as a keeper, then De Gea as a keeper, this is important. It's really, really tough. Do you play with sentiment or not? I would not be surprised if Ollie turns around and drops David. I would not be surprised. Do I agree with that? Probably not. I'd give De Gea the rock, because the reason is De Gea is still a number one goalkeeper as well. He can go and be a number one goalkeeper in most top clubs in Europe. He's not suddenly a rubbish player. This is a problem. There's too many are just completely writing him off, or there's others that are saying, oh, well, Henderson's Brexit FC. These sort of silly things. Both are really good goalkeepers. Both are number ones, and they are number ones. I'd give it to David and give him a send-off. He's been so loyal to United, He probably looks over at Real Madrid and thinks, I could have won 3 Champions Leagues. It could have been more with David De Gea. You just don't know. He was that good at that time. He was the best keeper in the world. One comment I do want to make on De Gea is that, possibly, his best season came obviously in that Mourinho season. I think when United finished second. The Arsenal game obviously stands out as the game which everyone remembers. I mean, it was 31 shots they had, I believe, and he was just that double save for Lacazette and Sanchez, was it? Or was it Lacazette and Ramsey, someone like that? Amazing. But he massively overperformed in that season. If you look at the statistics, he was just playing out of his skin. There is an argument that David De Gea, perhaps has struggled over the years because he's had less to do. He's facing less shots. That concentration level, we talk about Henderson's concentration. Has he got it as well? He's proving that he does for the moment. We've still got quite a few games in the season. But David De Gea really thrived when he was peppered. His goal was peppered, in terms of making save after save after save under Jose Mourinho, with a side that played on the back foot. And you're seeing with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, we're not conceding as many shots on goal, which means he has less to do, which means concentration needs to be up. I think that's probably where De Gea has faltered a little bit. You could argue that people talk about Henderson's, concentration, but De Gea has actually shown that he has it in him to switch off when the long shot comes in. It's not even a difficult long shot. He did it in his early days. Remember against Manchester City in the Community Shield against, was it Dzeko? We're talking about Dzeko, obviously playing against Roma. He has a tendency to do that with the long shots. He makes the reaction saves, but placing his feet and being able to spot where the ball's going to go and making sure that he's prepared. Sometimes he has lacked in that department. So, look, I think it's a difficult one. I think Ollie should do the right thing and probably play De Gea. As Mike said, he's a model professional. He really is. I'm going to be really sad to see him going. Like, I really do mean that, because in the last sort of 8 years, when you've had the most, look, I'm 26 years old, so all I've known is Sir Alex, and you've had a really difficult time. There's one player that stood up, and he is a legend at Manchester United. He's a Premier League legend. He deserves so much more. And it's quite sad because United are looking more positive, the first time looking positive in 8 years, and it's going down to the end of his time here. And, United might win a few more trophies, and David deserved to win them all. So I'd love to see him go to another European club and really go and win and compete in the Champions League, because I think that's what he deserves. I think Ollie should play him. I think he should give him the send-off. He's still got tremendous value to Manchester United. And then I think they should part ways in the summer.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Joe, because what Haider says is completely true. David De Gea is still a number one choice goalkeeper for a lot of teams in world football. I think the biggest thing that I come to is that I don't feel like Ollie is so much of a manager that goes on sentiment, and we saw that with Romero. So I feel like if he believes that Dean Henderson gives United the best chance to go through, that he probably would. And the only reason I think it may be slightly different to the Romero incident is that Romero was the goalkeeper the whole way through. And then he takes him out when it gets to the semi-final. Look, I think I completely agree with Haider. I would love David De Gea to get to play the semi-final and the final. We win and he gets to kind of lift the trophy, goes off like that. But often football doesn't work out that way. And it is unfortunate, actually, what happened with Romero, because you actually look at it, and if David De Gea did leave, Romero would have been the perfect kind of backup goalkeeper for someone like Dean Henderson, because you still do want that bit of experience there in behind. And look, that's what United will go for, because they're not going to have two young goalkeepers kind of moving forward if David De Gea does leave. They're going to bring someone with experience. Yeah. So I guess, for you, do you think it would be the right decision just to allow David De Gea to continue on and play the rest of the games in the Europa League after all the years that he's given to the club? And I think it's important to know that I think I'm very happy that he did join during kind of Alex Ferguson's time, because he did get to win quite a lot of trophies before all the changes did happen. But again, do you think that Solskjaer does need to kind of look at the kind of more sentimental side and let David De Gea continue on and play these last couple of games? Or do you think he needs to continue kind of being kind of ruthless and picking whoever he thinks gives him the best chance to win?
It's one of those head and heart situations, isn't it? I think that my heart tells me, like Haider, that that's the way to do it. My head tells me that I think Solskjaer will go Henderson. I think he maybe should go Henderson. The only slight difference as well, let's not forget, with the Romero situation this year, is that semi-final was a one-off game last year because of the COVID situation. There's obviously two legs here, so I mean, there is scope. So if De Gea plays in the first leg and has a Rick, does he then change it for the second leg? I don't know. I mean, you've got a bit more time with this semi-final because it is over two legs. It's not just that one-off game. But it's really, really tricky because, look, like you just said there, would like nothing more than to see Dave lift this trophy. He should have lifted many more, like Haider said as well, in his time. What matters is another player who just joined the club at a really unfortunate time. And again, maybe a player who should have, is good enough to have won more, So you would like to see these guys play some part. But at the end of the day, Ollie's got, we're talking about his future every week, aren't we? And whether he's good enough to be a Man United manager. So he can't just pick players because obviously it feels right in the heart. He's got to do what he thinks can win this trophy. But what I will say is I'm no disrespect to the teams that are left in this, because Roma are a fantastic side. Villarreal are a great side. And even Arsenal, we seem to struggle with Arsenal. I was really hoping they might go out tonight.
Arteta's got the number on Ollie. That worries me. If I'm honest with you, it's a one-off game. I think United could lose to Arsenal. No, that's a bit negative. I think the best bet for United is if Villarreal get through.
Win.
Win. And
100%.
We get to
the
go.
Point
Because
sorry, Ciaran.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, of all the managers in the league, you'd argue that actually Arteta's the one that Ollie struggles against the most because people, yes, Arsenal 11th, but we say this consistently. Arteta is a good manager. He's a good tactician. Yeah. His issue is that he's not a great man manager. He's quite abrupt. He's obviously a disciplinarian, and also Arsenal haven't got a very good squad. I just think that, be careful what you wish for. I don't want to play Arsenal in the final. I'd love to beat Arsenal, but I can very much see United losing to Arsenal because Arsenal have the number on us, and it wouldn't surprise me if that happens, to be honest.
Yeah, for me, it's actually the opposite. It's like Arsenal are the one team I would hate to lose to. If you did get to a final, I'd be okay if you lost to someone like Villarreal and they won. Okay, that's fine. But to have to lose to Arsenal and listen to some of their fans go on because
they're celebrating like the treble bit. That's why
they're bad enough as it is, and they're 11th in the Premier League, and that just to show you if they do get to a final. But look, I think a lot of people are expecting Arsenal to go through, but I think that's a lot of people not actually watching how well Villarreal have played this season. So it is. I think they are going to be two really interesting ones, and I see everybody talking, Arsenal United final. It could very well easily be Villarreal and Roma, because they've probably played better than the two English teams in the overall competition. So
Roma have also got Mkhitaryan, who's playing really, really well.
Yeah. Can I just say as well? Can I just say here as well that just to finish on the goalkeeper, I don't think the goalkeeper position should be the difference between United winning this and losing it. This is what I'm about to say. No disrespect to the teams that are in this, but over 2 games against Roma, with the attacking players that United have got on the pitch and the ability that they've got on the pitch, they should be able to create enough, even if there is a mistake or two from De Gea, to be able to do it over 2 legs. It's not ideal. We know that. We know good goalkeepers can win matches. But United should have enough without this becoming an issue about who plays in goal. That is the point. And the same in the final. Whoever they get in the final, they should have enough there, to get through. And we know it doesn't always work like that. So we'll have to see. But I'm excited and I'm confident. But it's one of those with Arsenal. If you can guarantee you're going to beat them, you would love them to be the final opponents. It's a little bit like in the lower leagues in football. There's probably no better feeling than going up through the playoffs that day at Wembley and winning it. But the problem with the playoffs is you can never guarantee you're going to win them. If you can, then you go up that way every time. And I'd win this Europa League by beating Arsenal in the final every time. But football doesn't always work out that way, does it?
Yeah, look, as long as United actually get to that final, I think that's the most important thing. Look, because I think the last thing that Ollie or this team needs is to go 6 semi-finals and without winning. It then becomes that kind of monkey on their back where they just can't get past that one stage, and it starts becoming a bigger thing than it should be. So I think that's a big point, that just to get through Roma and get to a final is actually really important for some of these players, that they need to get in and experience winning. And it's so much like we talk about the likes of Liverpool when they won the Premier League. Well, they won the Champions League previously, so they got over a hump of being able to win a competition. City have been able to do it year on year. Even when they don't win the Premier League, they tend to win, whether it's the League Cup or the FA Cup. They always do well in those competitions. So the players get used to kind of getting over a line and actually winning a trophy. And I think that's where United, that's the next step of the process. They need to win something. And look, I think, like you said, Joe, there's really no excuse not to win the Europa League because they are better than the majority of the teams left. I agree with Haider. I think the hardest game in the final would be Arsenal. Just stylistically, I think that's the problem, because you'd have Villarreal come at you and you'd have a lot more space to go and attack them. But look, that's all time we have today. But again, it was a good professional performance by Manchester United. There's a lot of positives, and then there's also things that we can work on. Look, we'll be back next week again, probably around the same time. I don't think there's a European game next week, so we'll probably be back around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock next week. So make sure you join us in the HallOfSportz podcast. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, and subscribe to the channel. Yeah, exactly where Joe is pointing on there. And we'll see you guys next week.